April 9th, 1970, 11:18 p.m. Thursday, West 125th Street and Frederick Douglass Boulevard, Harlem. A black Lincoln Continental idles at the curb with its parking lights off, and inside the glove box is a folded program from the Apollo, creased twice, stained with something that isn't champagne. 2 blocks away, a young woman who just sang her way into a future steps into the night to meet her brother. By 1:41 a.m., her voice is gone. By 2:06 a.m., a patrol unit logs an abandoned limousine behind a shuttered freight entrance near East 149th Street in the Bronx. And by sunrise, a rumor is already moving faster than the police. The men who took her wore white under their coats, but they didn't come for her. They came for Frank Lucas. Frank is 5 minutes late. 5 minutes. That's what the doorman will tell detectives later, shaking his head like he's trying to understand how time can be that sharp. She was here, he says. Then she wasn't. Backstage at the Apollo, the hallway smells like powder and warm bulbs. A road case sits open like a gutted suitcase. Someone's laughter floats from a dressing room down the hall. The night has that after-show buzz, too much energy and nowhere to put it. Frank moves through it like a man walking against traffic. He's holding a bouquet of red roses wrapped in paper, the kind you buy when you don't know what to say, but you know you have to show up with something. In his other hand, a small black jewelry box. Not jewelry, keys. A gift he shouldn't be buying, a promise he shouldn't be making. But he made it anyway. He reaches the door with the brass star taped to it, Melody L. Dot, and knocks once, twice, then opens it without waiting. The room is wrong. A chair is on its side. The mirror bulbs are still on, humming, but the mirror is cracked in a spiderweb. Her makeup case is open on the floor like someone dumped it with a boot. A garment bag hangs empty. The roses go loose in Frank's hand, petals falling as if the bouquet is already dying. He doesn't call her name. Not yet. He just stands there listening. No footsteps. No crying. No angry breathing. Nothing. Then he sees the shoe. A single silver heel near the baseboard, like a punctuation mark. Melodies hail. She wore those when she wanted to feel taller than the room. Frank's eyes go to the phone on the vanity. The cord has been yanked hard enough to pull the base sideways. He checks the line like he's checking a pulse. Dead. A stagehand appears in the doorway. Young, wide-eyed. Mr. Lucas? Frank turns his head slow. Not panicked. Not loud. Just cold. Who came in here, he says, after she walked off stage? The kid swallows. Nobody. I mean, there was 2 men, suits. So they were with management. What management? The kid blinks. I don't know. They had badges. Badges? Frank repeats, like he's tasting the word. Yeah, like city. Frank looks past him into the hall. Where are the cameras? He asks. The kid frowns. Cameras? The ones on the corner, Frank says. The ones that watch this hallway. The kid's face tells him the answer before his mouth does. That they've been out all week. All week, Frank says. Convenient. He walks out without another word. No bouquet. No keys. Just a man leaving a room the way he entered it. Quiet. Except now the quiet means something. Out front, Harlem is still awake. It's that hour when the bars exhale and the street takes in the rest. Taxi horns. Music leaking from open doors. A couple arguing hard enough to make strangers stare. The Apollo sign throws blue and gold light across faces that are already turning into stories. Frank sees the street in angles. He always has. Who's watching? Who's pretending not to? Who's too close to the curb? Tonight, the curb matters. A Lincoln Continental sits down the block with no driver visible. A big car, clean, wrong for this street at this hour unless somebody wants you to notice it. Frank looks at it once, then keeps walking. He doesn't react. Reaction is a gift. He doesn't hand them gifts. He steps into a payphone booth, shuts the glass door, and drops a coin like he's making an offering. He dials a number he never dials from home. 1 ring. 2. A voice answers on the second ring. Gravel. Sleepy. Loyal. Yeah. Bobby, Frank says. You get a car? Always. I need you at the Apollo, Frank says. Now. Silence. A beat where Bobby hears something in Frank's voice and decides not to ask questions. I'm coming, Bobby says. Frank hangs up, then dials another number. This one picks up on the first ring. Mr. Lucas, a woman's voice says. Efficient, scared and hiding it. Tell the council, Frank says. No business tomorrow. The woman hesitates. Mr. Lucas. No, Frank says. Listen to me. From midnight until midnight, nobody sells nothing. Not a nickel bag. Not an aspirin. Not a single drop. You tell them if they don't like it. They can come tell me to my face. Another beat. Yes, sir. He hangs up, steps out of the booth. The street air hits him like it's trying to wake him up. A car passes slow. Two white men inside. One looks at Frank too long. Frank watches the car go, then looks at the neon reflection in the payphone glass. His own face, split by light, eyes steady. Somebody wanted his attention. Somebody got it. At 2:06 a.m., the radio log for the 40th precinct in the Bronx records a call about an abandoned stretch limousine near a freight entrance off East 149th, close enough to the river that the air tastes like metal. The officer who responds later tells it like this. It looked like a prom car somebody forgot. Then we got closer and saw the window was fog from the inside. The window is cracked down an inch. The night is cold, but not cold enough to fog glass unless there's breath trapped inside. By the time the door opens, the fog slides out like a secret. Melody Lucas is in the back seat. Her stage makeup is still on. Glitter at the corner of her eye. A thin necklace twisted around her wrist like someone used it as a handle. No pairs. No coat. One shoe missing. A detective will later say the scene felt staged. Like it wasn't just a killing. Like it was a message someone wanted delivered clean. The next day, the papers run it small. A local singer found dead. No headline. No photo. Just ink. Harlem doesn't need a headline to understand what it means. Because Harlem heard the other part. That some men were seen near the Apollo in coats too heavy for spring. That they spoke soft with southern edges. That one of them dropped a matchbook with a symbol burned into it. 3KS. Then picked it up fast like he realized where he was. And that, in this city, you don't bring that kind of fire into Harlem unless you want to start something you can't put out. By 9:12 a.m., Frank Lucas sits at a corner table in a closed diner on Lenox Avenue. The sign says open, but the door is locked. The owner let him in through the back, like it's a confession. Frank has coffee in front of him he hasn't touched. His suit is the same one from last night. The roses are gone. The keys are gone. The only thing on the table besides the coffee is Melody's silver heel in a brown paper bag, like evidence he collected himself. Bobby sits across from him, hands clasped, watching Frank's eyes more than his mouth. How bad? Bobby asks. Frank's answer is a question. How many cameras cover the Apollo corridor? Frank says. Bobby blinks. I don't know. 2, 3. How many were working last night? Frank asks. Bobby's jaw tightens. They said they were out. Frank nods once, like he expected it. Who can do that? Bobby asks, already knowing the answer lives in a uniform. Frank finally lifts the coffee, sips it, sets it down. Still calm. Everybody can do something, Frank says, but only a cop can make it look like nothing. At 10:03 a.m., Harlem wakes up to a weird kind of thirst. No product, no runners on corners, no whispers at barber shops about whose work is pure, no quick hand-to-hand. The street doesn't understand at first. Then it starts to itch. By noon, addicts are walking blocks they don't usually walk. By 2 p.m., men who never speak to strangers are speaking to anybody who looks like they might know something. By 4:30 p.m., Harlem is a city of eyes. Frank did that. He shut off the flow like a man closing a valve. And when you control the valve, you control the pressure. At 5:12 p.m., a man named Lil Wayne, who sleeps in the stairwell of a building on West 132nd, finds Bobby near a bodega and talks fast like his life depends on it. I saw the car, Wayne says. Limo. Long one. Like for weddings. When? Bobby asks. Last night, after the show, Wayne says, it was down by the Italian bakery on 116th, the one with the green awning. Two dudes in suits standing by it. White dudes, not from around. Bobby keeps his face blank. You sure? Wayne nods too hard. I'm sure. I'm hungry, man. I'm. Bobby puts something in Wayne's hand. Not cash. A folded slip with an address and time. Be there, Bobby says. Talk to Mr. Lucas yourself. Wayne's eyes widen like he's been told he's meeting the mayor. At 7:08 p.m., Frank Lucas drives past that bakery in a black Cadillac with plates that have been swapped twice. He doesn't stop. He doesn't need to. The bakery tells him everything. The men standing outside are too clean, too still. They look like they're waiting for a bus that never comes. One has a cigarette he's not smoking, just holding. The other watches the street like he's counting exits. A third man steps out of the bakery carrying a white box tied with string. He's Italian, mid-40s, thick neck, gold ring that catches the light. He hands the box to the cleaner of the two white men like it's nothing. A box from an Italian bakery to a white stranger at dusk. Harlem understands what that means. It means the city is shaking hands with itself in the dark. Frank's driver keeps rolling. The Cadillac turns the corner and disappears. Frank doesn't speak for a full block. Then, softly, he says they're mixing business. Bobby sits in the passenger seat now, leaning forward like he wants to hear every syllable. Who? Bobby asks. Frank looks out at the passing street. Italians don't need white robes, Frank says. White robes don't need Italians. But when they do, it means somebody thinks I'm out of my lane. At 9:36 p.m., Frank makes his first call to a name that never shows up in headlines. Detective Harold Miller. Badge number filed under a desk drawer no one opens unless they're paying. Miller answers like he's been waiting. Lucas. Frank's voice stays flat. You had cameras off at the Apollo. A pause. A little laugh that isn't amused. I don't know what you're talking about. Frank doesn't argue. He doesn't plead. He doesn't threaten yet. I'm going to see you, Frank says. Tonight. Where? Miller says, and even the word has teeth. You know where? Frank says. The place you go when you want to forget you got a badge. At 11:22 p.m., Miller walks into a backroom dice spot behind a storefront on 2nd Avenue that sells nothing but dust and bad candy. The front is a lie. The back is truth, tables, cards, low light, and men who talk with their eyes. Miller moves like he owns the room. His gun sits heavy under his jacket. He nods at a few men, gets nods back. That's how corruption looks when it's normalized. It looks like familiarity. Then he sees Frank Lucas sitting at a table with no cards in front of him. Frank is alone. That's what makes the room change. Alone doesn't mean unprotected. Alone means confident. Alone means this isn't a negotiation unless Frank says it is. Miller walks up, pulls out a chair without asking, sits. Your people got bold, Miller says. My people got dead, Frank answers. Miller smirks. That's the street. Frank reaches under the table and slides a small gym bag onto the felt. He unzips it halfway. Inside is a brick of white powder wrapped tight. Clean. Expensive. The kind of thing that turns men into believers. Miller's eyes flick down, then back up fast like he doesn't want anyone to catch him wanting it. That, Frank says, is more than you make in 10 years wearing that badge. Miller keeps his voice even. You think I'm for sale? Frank's gaze doesn't move. Everybody is. Miller chuckles like he's heard this line before. You're emotional, Lucas. That makes you sloppy. Frank leans in slightly. Not angry. Interested. Like a scientist watching a rat run into a trap. You turned off cameras in a hallway, Frank says. You moved patrols away from a block. You let a car sit where it shouldn't sit. That's not street. That's planning. Miller's jaw tightens. You don't have proof. Frank taps the gym bag. This is proof, he says. Because you're sitting here. Miller glances around. A few men are watching, pretending not to. The room is listening with the kind of silence that can ruin careers. What do you want? Miller asks. Frank doesn't say justice. He doesn't say revenge. Those are words for men who don't get things done. I want the name of the man who paid you, Frank says. I want it now, and I want it accurate. Miller's lips twitch. You're asking me to sign my own death certificate. Frank's voice drops. You already signed mine when you let my sister walk out a door into a car. That word, sister, lands heavier than a gun. Miller stares at Frank like he's trying to decide what kind of monster he's dealing with. The kind who shoots or the kind who waits. You don't know what you're into, Miller says finally. Frank's eyes narrow the slightest bit. Tell me. Miller shakes his head. No. Frank nods once, like that was one of the possible outcomes. He reaches into his jacket and pulls out a folded piece of paper. He places it on the table between them. It's a photograph. Grainy. A surveillance still from somewhere else, some other night. Miller walking into this same storefront, his arm around a man in a suit. The man's face is turned toward the camera for half a second. Miller sees it, and his skin goes pale under the tan. Where'd you get that? Miller whispers. Frank doesn't answer. Miller's voice changes. If I give you a name, you can't touch me. Frank's mouth doesn't move. Say it. Miller swallows. His eyes flick to the door like he's thinking about running, then back to Frank because the door doesn't matter. Not anymore. Tony Scalisi, Miller says. The room seems to inhale. Frank nods, slow, like he's marking a line in a ledger. Spell it, Frank says. Miller's eyes flare. What? Spell it, Frank repeats, calm as a priest. So there's no mistake. Miller does it. Every letter. Like he's reading his own sentence out loud. Frank stands, zips the gym bag closed, and slides it toward Miller. Miller stares at it like it's bait. You're giving it to me? Frank looks down at him. That's your payment, he says. For the name. Miller reaches for it, then hesitates. And you? Frank's answer is quiet. I'm taking what I came for. Miller looks up, searching Frank's face. We're done. Frank pauses, just long enough to make Miller hope. Then Frank says, we're done. Frank walks out. Alone. Miller sits there with the bag in front of him, breathing like a man who just survived a storm. He never makes it home. At 6:27 a.m. the next morning, a sanitation worker finds Detective Harold Miller slumped over the steering wheel of his unmarked sedan on Riverside Drive. No bulitoles. No blood on the seat. Just a man with his mouth slightly open like he tried to say something and change his mind. The official report says suspected overdose. The report doesn't mention the gym bag. The report doesn't mention the way Miller's badge has been left on the passenger seat like an apology. In Harlem, nobody calls it an overdose. They call it a receipt. By Saturday, April 11th, Frank Lucas knows Tony Scalisi isn't just some neighborhood Italian with a temper and a taste for suits. Scalisi is connected. His money moves through trucking. His people move through docks. His favors move through judges who drink at the right bars and take the right envelopes. Scalisi has an office above a meat market on Mulberry Street. Little Italy, the kind of building that smells like garlic and old power. He has men who stand outside pretending to be tourists. He has men inside pretending to be family. Frank doesn't go to Mulberry Street. Not yet. First, he cuts the legs out from under Scalisi's table. Sunday, April 12th, 3:14 a.m. The Bruckner Expressway. A box truck carrying contraband liquor rolls north. Lights low, doing 50 in a 45 like the driver thinks speed is safety. The truck belongs to a company owned by a cousin of Scalisi's cousin. In that world, that's ownership. A dark sedan pulls up alongside. No siren, no warning, just two silhouettes. The truck swerves. The driver tries to brake. The sedan doesn't chase. It simply stays there long enough to make the driver panic. The truck clips the barrier, shudders, and comes to a stop in a shower of sparks. When the driver crawls out, coughing and shaking, he finds something waiting on the asphalt behind his truck. A vinyl record. No sleep. Just the disc, black and glossy under streetlight. On the label, written in thick marker, one word, melody. The driver will later tell an investigator he heard music playing somewhere, faint but unmistakable, like a song drifting out of a car with its windows up. He'll insist it was a woman singing. The investigator will write it down, then cross it out like it sounded too crazy. But the story spreads. It spreads because it's not just damage. It's humiliation. It's somebody telling Scalisi, in a language he understands, that his money can be touched. Monday, April 13th, 9:50 p.m. A second truck gets hit near Hunts Point. Same pattern. No bodies left in the street. Just drivers terrified and records left behind like calling cards. By Tuesday, Scalisi is furious. By Tuesday night, he's scared. He calls a meeting at a social club on Mott Street, and the men around him talk low and fast, trying to sound like this is controllable. One of them says, "It's Lucas." Another says, "No, it's bigger." The cops are whispering. Scalisi slams his hand on a table. "I don't care who it is," he says. "Find a hand that's doing it and break it." A man in the corner, quiet until now, clears his throat. "Maybe you should have never touched the girl," he says. Silence. Scalisi turns slowly. "What did you say?" The man shrugs like he can't help himself. "I'm saying you made it personal." Scalisi leans in. His voice drops. "It was personal already," he says. "Lucas thinks he's a king. Harlem king. I needed him to remember kings get buried. That's the truth. Not business. Not strategy. Ego. And ego is expensive." Wednesday, April 15th. 2:22 a.m. Frank sits in the back of a parked car on 141st Street watching a tenement window on the third floor. A small light flickers behind a curtain. A radio plays faint somewhere inside. The street is empty except for one man sweeping a stoop like he's scrubbing away bad luck. Bobby sits in the driver's seat, turning his head just enough to speak without being seen. "You sure about this?" Bobby asks. Frank's voice is low. "I'm sure about what I need to know." A knock comes at the window. Bobby flinches. His hand dips toward his jacket. Frank doesn't move. A kid stands outside, 16 maybe, cheeks hollow, wearing a hoodie that's too thin for the hour. He holds up a folded paper bag like it's a peace offering. Bobby cracks the window an inch. The kid slides the bag through. Inside, a Polaroid. Frank takes it, looks down. It shows a basement room. Concrete walls. A table. A man's hand resting on a stack of pamphlets. White paper, bold black letters. Another hand holds a cigarette over an ashtray. On the table, a hood, folded. White cloth like a ghost waiting to be born. On the back of the photo, written in shaky pen, an address in Jersey and a date. April 9th. The kid whispers, "They ain't from here. They come up on weekends. They meet at that place. They talk about the work." Frank looks up. "Who took this?" The kid's eyes dart away. "A man. He's dead now." Bobby swears under his breath. Frank folds the photo and puts it in his pocket like it's money. "What's your name?" Frank asks the kid. "Ricky." Frank nods once. "Ricky," he says. "You did good." Ricky's eyes widen like he wants to ask for something. He doesn't. He knows better than to bargain with men like this. Frank reaches into his pocket and hands him a roll of cash thick enough to change his week. Ricky stares at it like it might burn him. Frank's voice stays even. "Go home," he says. "Lock your door. If anybody asks you where you got that, you don't know. If anybody tells you they know Frank Lucas, you don't answer." Ricky swallows and nods hard. "Yes, sir." He disappears into the night. Bobby looks back at Frank. Jersey. Frank's eyes stay forward, reflecting a streetlight. "Not just Jersey," Frank says. "A meeting." Bobby exhales. So it's true. Frank doesn't say the letters out loud. He doesn't have to, because everybody knows what white cloth means in a dark room. Thursday, April 16th, day 7. Frank has been awake, by most accounts, for 36 hours. That's what the people around him say later, the ones who lived long enough to tell the story. They say he never raised his voice once. They say he barely ate. They say he moved through the week like a man doing paperwork, except the paperwork was lies. At 8:19 p.m., a black sedan crosses the George Washington Bridge heading west. Frank is in the back seat. Bobby drives. Two other cars follow behind at a distance, spaced out like they're just traffic. In Frank's lap is the Polaroid. Next to it is a small cassette tape in a plastic case. On the label, in Melody's handwriting, Apollo set list. Bobby glances in the rearview mirror. You bringing that? Frank taps the cassette once. They should hear her, he says. Since they took her. Bobby's mouth tightens. Frank, what if it's a trap? Frank's eyes don't lift. Everything's a trap, he says. That's why we don't step where they want. We step where they fear. The address on the Polaroid leads them to a low house in a quiet part of New Jersey where the lawns are cut too clean and the streetlights feel like surveillance. The kind of neighborhood where a black man in a Cadillac gets noticed even if he's just lost. So Frank doesn't bring a Cadillac. He brings a car that disappears. At 9:47 p.m., they park 2 blocks away and walk the last stretch. No jilling, no running. Just shoes on pavement and breath in cool night air. The house has one light on in the basement window. A faint glow like a secret. Bobby whispers, "How many?" Frank answers without looking. "Enough." A dog barks somewhere down the street, then stops like it got corrected. They reach the side yard. A back gate. Unlocked. Too easy. Bobby's shoulders tense. Frank lifts a hand. "Stay." He listens. No te ve. No footsteps above. Just a low murmur from below, like men talking in a room that thinks it's safe. Frank nods. The first door they encounter leads to the basement stairs. Bobby leans close. We go down there, it's tight. Frank's voice is a thread. Tight is good, he says. Tight means they can't scatter. They move down. The air changes immediately. Damp. Concrete. Old paint. Cigarette smoke stuck in walls. At the bottom of the stairs is a door. Behind it, voices. Said she was his. One voice says, laughing. Another voice, amused. Didn't matter who she was. She screamed the same. Bobby's hand clenches into a fist, so hard his knuckles go pale. Frank's face doesn't change, but his eyes do something, focus tighter like a lens narrowing. He reaches into his jacket and pulls out the cassette. He doesn't put it away. He holds it like a key. Then he opens the door. From men in the basement. 2 at a table. 1 by a shelf with boxes. 1 leaning back in chair, boots up like he's home. White men. Rough hands. Cheap suits. 1 has a ring with a strange symbol. Another has a folded white cloth on the chair beside him. They freeze as the door swings open. For 1 second, nobody moves. The world holds its breath. Then the man with the ring stands fast, hand going under his jacket. Frank's voice cuts through the motion. Calm, commanding, not loud. Don't, he says. It isn't a plea. It's a verdict. Behind Frank, 2 more men step into view, their postures saying the part Frank doesn't have to say out loud. You're outnumbered, and you didn't even know the count. The ring man hesitates, eyes flicking from Frank to Bobby to the shadow behind them. His hand stops halfway. Who the hell are you? The ring man demands, trying to bring his voice up to authority. Frank steps 1 pace into the room. I'm the brother, he says. The room goes quiet in a different way. Not confusion. Recognition. One of the men at the table mutters. Lucas. Bobby takes another step in, closing the door behind them with a click that sounds like a lock. The ring man tries to smile and fails. This ain't Harlem, he says. You don't run here. Frank's eyes move around the room. Pamphlets on the table. A list of names. A map with circles. A stack of envelopes. Cash. Not a lot. Enough to make these men feel employed. Frank points at the envelopes with his chin. Who paid you, he asks. The ring man's jaw flexes. We don't talk to you people. Frank nods once, like he expected that too. He turns his head slightly. Bobby, he says. Play it. Bobby pulls a small, portable cassette player from under his jacket. He slots the tape in with a steady hand, like he's done this 100 times. Click. A hiss of tape. Then Melody's voice fills the basement. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just pure. Clear. A woman singing like she believes the world has a place for her. The 4 men stare at the sound like it's a ghost. Frank watches them watch it. He speaks over her voice. soft enough that they have to lean in to hear him. You heard her, he says. Now you're going to tell me who put money on her life. The man by the shelf laughs nervously. Man, you're crazy. Frank looks at him. Crazy is thinking you can touch my blood and go back to your little meetings, he says. The ring man's face hardens. We ain't scared of you, he says. Frank's mouth tightens slightly. You're scared of being small, he says. That's why you wear costumes. That lands. The ring man's eyes flash. He takes a step forward like he wants to prove something. Bobby shifts. The men behind Frank shift too, silent, coordinated, not rushing, just making the room smaller. The ring man stops again. Because he can feel it now. This isn't a street fight. This is containment. Frank points again at the envelopes. Names, he says, or you don't leave this room. One of the men at the table, a thinner one with tired eyes, licks his lips. He looks at the ring man, then away, like he doesn't want to die loyal. It wasn't just us, the tired-eyed man says suddenly. We got hired. The ring man snaps. Shut up. Frank's gaze locks on the tired-eyed one. Hired by who? The tired-eyed man breathes fast. An Italian. From the city. He came down. Said she was leverage. Said it would teach you. Frank doesn't blink. Name. The tired-eyed man swallows, then says it. Tony Scalisi. Bobby's eyes flick to Frank. The name lands like a nail being driven into wood. The ring man lunges toward the tired-eyed man, furious, but one of Frank's men steps into his path without drama, blocking him like a door. The ring man's voice rises. You stupid. Frank cuts it off. Enough. Melody's voice keeps singing. Beautiful. Unbothered. Frank looks at all four men now. You came to Harlem wearing hate, he says. But you didn't do it for free. You did it because you got paid. The man by the shelf spits. So what? You gonna go cry to the cops? Frank turns his head slightly, like he's curious. The cops, he says. The cops were already in the room, and they still let her die. The ring man's face twists. You can't do nothing. We got people. Frank nods. So do I. He gestures with 2 fingers. His men move, fast but controlled, and the 4 in the basement are disarmed and pushed back. No spectacle, no drawn-out struggle. Just a quick, ugly shuffling of bodies and the sound of a chair scraping the floor. Frank doesn't touch them. He doesn't have to. His violence is delegation. That's what makes it terrifying. He steps closer, crouches slightly, so he's eye level with the ring man. You want to be remembered? Frank asks softly. The ring man breathes hard. Go to hell. Frank nods, almost polite. You will, he says. But first you're going to help me. He stands and looks at Bobby. Take them, he says. Bobby hesitates, just long enough to show he's human. Frank. Frank's eyes don't leave the men in the basement. Take them, he repeats. The men are moved out of the basement, up the stairs, out into the night. No screams. No gunshots. No neighbors calling police. Just 4 shadows being swallowed by 4 darker shadows. Melody's voice keeps playing as the basement empties. Frank stays behind for a moment alone in the room that held hate. He walks to the table and picks up one of the envelopes. Opens it. Inside is cash and a note with a phone number. A New York number. Manhattan. He folds the note and puts it in his pocket. Then he looks at the white cloth on the chair. The hood. Folded like it's waiting. He doesn't touch it. He doesn't need to. He turns the cassette player off. The sudden silence feels violent. At 11:58 p.m., Frank Lucas is back in Manhattan. Not Harlem. Not yet. Mulberry Street. Little Italy is louder at night, but it's a different kind of loud. Tourists. Laughter. Waiters shouting orders in Italian. Men in suits standing near doorways pretending they're just waiting for someone. Frank walks down the sidewalk alone. That's the detail everyone remembers later. He walked alone. No entourage. No show. Just him, in a dark suit, carrying a slim leather briefcase. A man at the door of an upscale restaurant steps forward, blocking him with a smile that isn't a smile. We're closed, the man says. Frank looks at him like he's furniture. No, you're not, he says. The man's smile tightens. This is private. Frank's voice stays low. So, am I? Behind the doorman, through the glass, Frank can see Tony Scalisi at a corner table. White tablecloth. Candle. 3 men around him. 2 more nearby, pretending not to be with him. Scalisi's hair is slick, his suit expensive, his ring bright. He looks like a man who thinks the world has a receipt in his pocket. Scalisi looks up and sees Frank. For half a second, Scalisi's face shows surprise. Then it hardens into something like pleasure. He lifts a hand slightly, like granting permission. The doorman steps aside. Frank walks in. The room quiets the way rooms do when a storm walks through the door. People keep talking, but softer. Forts keep moving, but slower. Frank approaches the table. Scalisi doesn't stand. He stays seated like a king testing a challenger. Frank Lucas, Scalisi says, voice smooth. You're a long way from home. Frank sets the briefcase on the table. I go where my business is, Frank says. Scalisi smiles. Your business is Harlem. Frank's eyes don't move. My business was my sister, he says. Now it's you. One of Scalisi's men leans forward. Watch your mouth. Frank looks at him once, then back to Scalisi. I'm watching everything, he says. Scalisi's smile fades. You got nerve, he says. Frank's reply is immediate. You got careless. Scalisi's eyes narrow. Careless? You paid men you don't understand to do a job you couldn't do yourself, Frank says. That's careless. Scalisi chuckles, but it's thin. You got proof. Frank flips the latches on the briefcase. Inside aren't stacks of cash. Inside are papers, photocopies, ledger pages, a list of doc invoices, a handwritten set of numbers, names, amounts, dates. Scalisi's smile disappears completely. Frank slides one page across the table so Scalisi can see it. Scalisi's eyes flick down. He goes still, because it's the kind of paperwork that gets you killed by your own friends. Where'd you get this? Scalisi whispers, the first crack of fear slipping through. Frank's voice stays calm. Your own people sell you, he says. Same way you try to sell me a lesson. Scalisi's hand trembles slightly as he turns a page. This ain't. It's real, Frank says. Every number, every name, every theft. Scalisi looks up fast. You trying to blackmail me? Frank shakes his head once. I'm giving you a choice, he says. Scalisi laughs, but it's not laughter. It's panic dressed up. You don't give me choices. Frank leans in slightly. I do, he says, because I'm the only one in this room who doesn't need you alive. Scalisi's men shift. Hands slide under jackets. Eyes harden. Frank doesn't move. He looks at Scalisi like the guns don't matter. You're going to tell your people you got robbed, Frank says. You're going to tell them you lost money. You're going to tell them whatever you want. But you're not going to tell them you try to make a point with my sister. Scalisi's eyes flash. Or what? Frank's voice drops to something almost gentle. Or will the 5 families read these papers tomorrow morning? He says. And you don't get to die by me. That is the twist Scalisi didn't see coming. Not a bullet, not a beating, a handoff. In that world, being killed by your own is worse than being killed by your enemy. Your enemy ends you. Your own people erase you. Scalisi stares at the papers like they're snakes. You think they'll believe you? Scalisi spitz. Frank's answer is simple. They'll believe the numbers, he says. They always do. Scalisi's jaw clenches so hard it looks painful. He tries to find a way out through pride, through threat, through intimidation. But Frank didn't come to fight a man. He came to move a piece on a board. Scalisi leans back, breathing heavier. You walk out of here, he says. You don't walk back. Frank closes the briefcase slowly, clicking each latch like he's sealing a coffin. I'm not coming back, Frank says. I came for something. I got it. He stands. Scalisi's men half rise, unsure whether to stop him. Scalisi lifts a hand sharply. Seat. They sit. Frank turns to leave. At the door, he pauses. Not for drama. For precision. He looks back at Scalisi one last time. She sang for free, Frank says. You paid to silence her. That's the difference between us. Then he walks out on a Mulberry Street and blends into the night like he was never there. What happens next becomes legend fast, and legends grow teeth. Some say a phone rang at 12:19 a.m. in a back room of a social club, and Scalisi answered it with a joke and hung up with a problem. Some say a black envelope arrived at 8:03 a.m. with copies of those papers inside and no note. Some say Scalisi tried to run, tried to call favors, tried to buy time. But the cleanest fact is this. On Friday morning, April 17th, Tony Scalisi doesn't show up to his office above the meat market. His men wait. His phone rings unanswered. His name stops moving through mouths. And in that world, when a name stops moving, it means someone else is moving it. Back in Harlem, at 12:01 a.m. on April 17th, the corners open again. Product flows. The city breathes. The pressure releases like a valve turned back on. People tell each other, softly, that Frank Lucas shut down Harlem for a day and made the whole neighborhood his informant. They tell each other a cop got found dead with no holes in him. They tell each other Italian trucks started getting hit and records got left behind like ghosts. They tell each other Frank walked into Little Italy alone with a briefcase and walked out alone with the same briefcase, and the men inside didn't touch him. None of those stories come with a confession. No court case ties it up. No neat moral at the end. Just the pattern. A week after Melody Lucas died, the men who had laughed about it were gone from their usual spots. The cop who could have stopped it was a deadline in a report. The Italian who thought he could teach Harlem a lesson became a rumor nobody wanted to repeat too loud. And Melody's voice, her real voice, kept living. Not in the papers. Not in police files. And the one thing Frank carried that week, that wasn't a weapon. A tape. People in Harlem swear they heard it sometimes late at night, drifting out of a passing car with the windows up, a woman singing like she still had a future. They say Frank would drive slow down 125th after midnight, alone in the back seat, watching the street like a man counting what it cost. And if someone ever brought up her name around him, if someone got brave enough to say, "Frank, I'm sorry," Frank would only nod once, like he'd already filed the grief away where it couldn't weaken him. Because the truth wasn't that he got revenge. The truth was colder. He turned his pain into a system, ran it for 7 days, and then turned the system back off like nothing happened. The last detail comes from a folded slip of paper that showed up in a precinct mailbox on the Upper West Side 2 weeks later. No return address. Inside was $5 and a handwritten note that read, simply, for the camera repair. No signature. No threats. Just a reminder that in New York, some men don't need a shout. They just collect what they're owed.